paladins get to be all righteous and holier than thou, and the most annoying thing is a paladin that's constantly like like making your group feel bad for doing like weird shit they want to do. Because if they have a chaotic person in the group, they're just constantly fighting, right?
You need someone to balance out that paladin. Like you need someone that says like, no, your gods, you're getting us into all this shit. I'm the one getting us out.
Someone has to humble that paladin.
Yeah,
sure.
Welcome to Beyond the Pixel, episode 8. I'm technical designer Luis Fernando Sandrin, and joining me as always, digital artist Ken Ha.
What's up?
Yeah, I skipped a week, but I didn't skip a beat. Just comes back right back
going,
at
dude?
you, baby. I'm doing good. What are we gonna talk about today? I just cut the music short because I was too full of myself. Never mind, I'll fix it in post.
We're talking about one of my all-time greatest favorite games. I think one of the greatest games ever invented, Dungeons and Dragons.
Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, man. Have you played D&D at all, like, or any of the other types of tabletop, like, role-playing games?
You know the answer to this question because I've played D&D with you.
That's true. That's true. I was setting you up there. Dude, okay, so the reason I wanted to talk about it is because D&D had an initial resurgence with Critical Role. You're familiar with Critical Role, right? Run by the legendary Matt Mercer.
Pretend I'm not.
Pretend you're not. Well, Matt Mercer and his 6 amazing voice actor buddies started a campaign a while ago called on their channel Critical Role, and it's fantastic because one, Matt Mercer is a extremely talented DM and puts a ton of work into it, and two, everybody can do legit video game fantasy like voice acting.
Yeah. Matt Mercer,
and so,
known for being the voice of Leon S. Kennedy and Resident Evil 4. Among
we
other
have,
things.
Last of Us star, I believe Ashley Johnson is in The Last of Us, right?
Yep.
Am I correct about that?
You're correct.
Our own game, Gears of War, Laura Bailey, I believe is Kate.
That is
correct. So there's
also every other female character in
every
any video game ever.
You need a strong, like, female character voice. Laura Bailey has got him.
Abby, right? And from Last of Us Part 2 as well.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So anyways, it's incredible to have those guys like all in one set. And so Critical Role, like the phenomenon started maybe a few years ago actually, when Critical Role like first did their initial episodes. And then it just grew and grew, and then like the tabletop gaming genre saw like a ridiculously large increase in its like audience members as well as like sales and stuff, to the point now that like PAX has its own tabletop section just for D&D types of things, right? So that was really, really huge. And then I think at a certain point that plateaued for a little bit, not because that Critical Role was falling off. In fact, Critical Role is still growing, I think. It's just not at the same rate. They have a huge audience. But I think the thing now that I'm really excited about is that that's opened the door to these even more in-depth Dungeons and Dragons like streamers to come out. And the one that I particularly wanted to point out is the one that I'm so freaking hyped about it. It's called it's run by this guy on Twitch called Arcadum. Right? So first I just gotta say that like Critical Role is amazing. I love Matt Mercer. I only have to point that out because there's a lot of really weird kind of nerdy hate right now against some of the Critical Role people. Like they get a lot of messed up comments sometimes, especially on like weird sites like Twitter and stuff.
What?
And it's not founded. I will summarize some of the basic calling points that they've made out, but like I said, I don't agree with them. One of them is they call it the Matt Mercer effect, which I find so insulting. And it's the idea that people have been watching Critical Role and their expectations are now so high that because from DMs like Matt Mercer, that when other people play their own D&D games, they find their players are having over expectation on how good the games are supposed to be, and people are starting to like hate on that.
They hate it because it's so good.
They hate the fact that Matt Mercer is so good that has set a high expectation on themselves. That's the premise, which it's essentially just a very insecure premise. There's like a million ways to dissect it. For example, like you shouldn't be comparing yourselves to someone else in the first place. That's just like a very
kind of
deeply
the point of a role model as well. Is
exactly
here's someone that you can like shoot to aim for.
Yeah, it's like saying Michael Jordan has made
dare
it
he
harder
be as
for
good
all
as-
basketball players because he's so good. Like it's ridiculous when you think about it, but
Yeah.
I think some of the comments aren't really rooted in that. I think a lot of the comments is just from part of them growing so large now that the relatively minuscule percentage of unhappy people has grown, even if it's like 0.001%. You multiply that by, they probably have millions of fans now. You're gonna get a few of them.
It's the people that are also blaming like Stephen Curry for like breaking basketball. It's like, basketball doesn't work if you keep shooting like from 3-point line and nailing every single shot.
Stop shooting, boy.
You shouldn't be making all these shots.
So that's just all to push that all aside, because the reason I wanted to do is just because I wanted to bring up the point that there was just some stuff that Critical Role wasn't filling. One, they have 6 incredible players, right? And Matt Mercer is incredible DM, and the focus is almost exclusively on the voice acting and the performance part of it, which is very impressive, right? But the other part that I freaking love about D&D is like the world building and the fact that you can create a very complicated world, and then there's so much like complexity that can go into it. And that's exactly what Arcanum and his world's called Verum has brought. So to give you an example, I would say like there's probably 30 of the top Twitch streamers right now, probably more than that. He's running 8 campaigns, all of them with top streamers. I don't think there's anyone on there that streams for less than 1,000, but maybe 1 or 2 people.
This is
like,
his career.
This is his career. Like you know, top streamer Moon. He's playing on that. He's a integral part of it. On top of this, 8 campaigns that he's running, right? He runs on Discord. I've never actually seen this ever before. He runs something called the Living World, which is a living D&D RPG world. He set up the entire lore and the set of events, and he has over 250 plus people playing D&D in his world using his specially made up classes, all the divinity, all the gods, right? And what's so crazy is that with these 8 streams that he's running right now, they're all interconnected in the exact same living world. So the people playing in the living world, the 250 like Discord players, their actions impact the stream players and vice versa. And all the stream players interact with each other. That's amazing. Insane. He has a team of dungeon masters that he trains in their world.
Oh,
and he's been building up this moment with the streamers for like 2 years. Like he literally started planning the steps back when he was a very small time streamer, and he started like the Living World, which he built first, right? It's such an amazing story because first the guy is awesome. He's like he is the nerd's nerd. You know, the guy that gets every reference that you're talking about, just loves everything. His whole goal is just to introduce more people to D&D, just like Matt Mercer, right? But the thing is, his world is so crazily intricate, and his combat system is so cool. Like he introduced these boss fights that are kind of like, they blew my mind because I thought Matt Mercer's stuff was awesome, and it is. His stuff is by the books, like awesome. But this guy brings in his own custom homemade rules that make the fight so much more interesting. And he has like a team of artists, which I am one of them, by the way. I have joined this like Discord community, fell in love with the
cadre of artists.
Cadre of artists. I'm on their artist hit squad. I watch streams and I paint and stuff like that. It's freaking awesome. But I think that is the resurgence of like the next wave of like Matt Mercer contemporaries, you know.
Well, this gentleman sounds like he's trying to take a chip off of J.R.R. Tolkien's old book.
Dude, absolutely, absolutely. And
Hopefully,
his voice
without the
acting is
racism,
crazy,
of
too.
course.
Well, there's racism in D&D. The races hate each other. It's what makes the
They're getting that. They're getting some of the more real world aspects of that out of D&D recently, at least.
yeah. Well, yes. Hopefully, that's
It's like it's
lore-based
not only the
racism.
dark skinned races that are barbaric for no
No,
reason.
no.
Yeah.
His world is amazing. So first off, what's crazy is that they're entering this large climactic moment in their campaign right now, where all the different campaigns are converging into one storyline point, just like we were
Oh.
talking about in gameplay, how you can have multiple branching stuff, but it all needs to pinpoint down back into like a central area.
Almost like what's that Nintendo game that came out? Octopath Traveler?
Yes, yeah, kind of like that. But what's so cool is that first off, he has what's called like a home camp, where the heroes are all gathering. That's their heroic like home base called Last Stand. And what's funny, he'll have it's exactly how it sounds. It's so badass. And what's funny is that like if one campaign is streaming and they're doing their campaign at the time, and their characters visit the camp, they'll often have other people from the other streams, like completely different groups, join them and role play them live in camp. So you have these people that are making like guest appearances out of nowhere, and they're like in character. They affect the roles and stuff. And one of my favorite, I'm just most of this podcast is going to be like fanboying over the stuff that just happened. But so we're just talking about Moon, right? His campaign was fighting this massive boss, and then for some in story reason, another character from another campaign entered that boss fight. Right?
Oh.
But because he accidentally revealed out loud, because everyone's like, "What the hell are you doing here?" And he's like, "Well, I just came from this place." And his old party was just in like this super secret, important artifact dungeon that they were clearing, and the big boss monster heard that out loud. And Arcanum is very much notorious for enforcing that there are risks to your actions and enforcing those risks with consequences, because he coldly believes that successes don't mean anything unless you have those actual risks, right? And the effect of this campaign, of that move, if that large godlike monster reached this crucial vital point, was that he would have to wipe that camp Last Stand and like everyone's campaign in it. And then everyone was talking about it afterwards, all the players, and he's like, "Yeah, I would 100% have done it, no questions asked, and I would have just started from scratch again. The world would needed a reset. That was the great fatal mistake of the last campaign, right?" And the current world that he's building is essentially the fallout of a previous campaign that he ran called 7 Years, 7 Days. It was like they became gods, and then all the stuff that they messed up rippled through the world, and then that's the world that all the Twitch players are playing in right now. So just crazy stuff like that, and then it just rejuvenated my love for Dungeons and Dragons. But fuck, man, it's so hard to get a game going. It's so hard to like find players and like a good DM. Like, we played an IDM just because, like, literally IDM because no one else played, and I just wanted to play so bad.
It's a hard job.
Yeah. Do you play any other campaigns outside of the ones that we ran, or do you play?
So
you do play, because you were just talking about one.
Yeah. So primarily, when it comes to D&D, I've only been a player. I've played, I think, 3 different campaigns that have done on average maybe 7 sessions on each of them.
Yep.
So none of them that really like got to any sort of satisfying conclusion before it sort of fell apart. I did, however, run Dungeon World, which, since we're talking about like different people that make different campaigns, I really have to shout out Friends at the Table with Austin Walker and crew. I've brought it up before. They're the ones that introduced me to Dungeon World and other Apocalypse Engine style games, like the Sprawl, which are a version of a tabletop game that is more oriented towards story and making actions that follow
Yeah.
So
less math, right?
it's less math. It's more about your skills absolutely 100% matter. Your class absolutely matters, and your alignment 100% matters. But it all leads towards what you as a player playing a character as a role playing character want to do in that moment in time, and then the mechanics are sort of broad and vague enough that the DM can shift rules around a little bit to make almost anything happen. Very little cases will there be a situation, if you have like a good DM like Austin Walker, will say like, no, we can't, you can't do that, like you don't have the right skill for it. It's like, no, you can do it, let's see what happens.
Yeah, it's essentially up to the imagination of your dungeon master in terms of what you can do.
And the whole rule book for Dungeon World really guides that, and so that's when I started really getting into it. And I ran my own campaign, did like 9 sessions for it. I had to take a break. We're like really close to the end of it, and I felt like I had 4 more sessions, but depending on like how things in my life go, I'm trying to like end it pretty quickly in 1 session, just so I can like say like I did a D&D like thing, and we ended it, and everyone had a great time.
It's okay. I never get a chance to end the sessions. Like I think
it's a really good end. It's a really good end.
People's experience is that it's if you have an ending, I think that's rare.
Yeah.
But I also think that's not necessary. I think it's like really fun even if you don't get a chance to end it.
Yeah.
But it's like the things that I think there's a bit of a trap in D&D is that when you first get into it, especially when you haven't played any sessions, you get really excited for the possibilities of like what could happen when you're higher level, or you can do this, especially when you're planning your characters. But all the fun is actually in like the role playing part of it. Like there is obviously fun in the character building and the tactician part of it, but that's like, I think that's an accent over the main gameplay. Which should be the RPing. When
I think about it, like the funnest moments that I had in like the Dungeon World campaign was when we just stumbled across different things by accident because the players wanted to do. For example, there was one where like we had a really tough session, and I was like, okay, I want them to relax, have fun. So I said, there's a festival in this town, and you can go hang out. Like, but we really want to go to like this island that's off in the distance. So let's go to the festival and try to hire a boatswain or like a captain of a boat. I'm like, okay. There's a watermelon crushing competition, and then there's this lady. She is a captain, and she says she will pilot you across the river if you can beat her at this watermelon crushing competition. So I made up these rules on the spot for a watermelon crushing competition that they terribly lost. But then she said, like, I'll take you on this boat, but you got to do like a quest for me. So then, like, it ended up like just coming out of this. This character now existed, and she's very good at crushing watermelons.
That the fun part about that doesn't come across when you watch a show like Critical Role is that it means so much more when it's tailored to you and your own actions than when you're watching it with someone else. Like if you're trying to broadcast D&D, then you might need something that's closer to Matt Mercer and their level, because you're essentially entertaining, right? But if you're just having a session by yourself or with your friends, then like it honestly doesn't matter how well people act or whatnot. It is important that they do. I think role playing is a very important component of it. But the fact that like because you do something usually pretty silly, and then your DM rolls a result, and then you accept what your DM says, one, because you had a chance to roll, so you had your input in it already, and then two, whatever he makes up is going to be specifically tailored to your fuck up or your brilliant idea or whatever it is that you want to play. It becomes so personal. Like I relate it back to when I go traveling, and I realized like when I first went traveling, I had all these world wonders that I wanted to cross off. I wanted to see the Eiffel Tower and the Great Wall, blah blah blah, right? And when I would actually get to these world wonders, dude, it was not as impressive at all, because one, there's like a billion people wherever you go to any of these world wonders. Like you go to the Eiffel Tower or the Leaning Tower of Pisa, that field is covered. It's covered with people, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean anything. And then I realized the points in my travels that I care about the most, I remember the most, are the quiet moments where it's like something that I had just me and this place, or me and my friends and this place. And D&D is just like that. But everything is like a quiet moment that's just for you guys. And that's why this is why like it sucks to tell someone else your D&D stories, because you can tell they don't give a shit they don't give nearly as much of a shit about it as you do.
You don't care about my watermelon crushing story. I get what you mean.
Well, I obviously get it because I can see those exact moments happening in D&D. But if you're telling someone that's not in D&D, they're just like, that sounds stupid.
Yeah. Well, for example, another story that I remember about that is that I created the spy that was a terrible spy, and he was disguised as a merchant. And like in order to convince people, he would just say like, "Don't worry, I'm a merchant," and he would jingle his little bag. My group liked it so much, one of them made a drawing of this character and put him on a shirt and put the logo, "Don't worry, I'm a merchant" on it. And she bought it for everyone in the group. And like that, like it means nothing to anyone, but like it was it's really funny moment because it was like his catchphrase for us.
It means something to you guys. Yeah. It is specifically attuned to your group. That's what it means. No one else can
like
wear that shit.
And the campaign was like full of stuff like that. There was a guy that always assisted them, but he was like this very tall like wolf man. And like every time he would leave them and walk away from frame, I would like say like, and then off in the distance you hear someone go, "Ah!" Because like he would always scare someone because he was so tall, and that was his thing. And they loved that. They still make fun of it towards this day. Say like, don't go off screen, Louise. You're gonna make someone break something.
It's funny how you are making these fake memories, but they're real.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
That's a good point.
They're real. They're very much real. One of my favorite moments was I was playing a group with I don't think you were in this one, but you know Lucas.
I know Lucas.
Yeah. So we were playing. He was playing a druid, and then
figures.
The entire group spent like something like they're in this desert that had no water, and they had to find a source of water or to fill their satchels because they had to like make the trek across like the Mojave Desert in this world, right? And they spent like 8 hours figuring out what to do. And like 8 hours in game time and like 45 minutes in actual time discussing it, and then like at the very end of it, looks like Lucas is like looking at his like spell sheet and he's like, "Hey, do you think create water is useful in this scenario?" So then of course like I have to RP that the entire group has been because they've already rolled all their like they found water sources. They spent like 6 hours looking for shit, right? And then afterwards, Lucas's character just shows up. It's like, do you guys think make water would be useful? Oh my god! That's like there's
like everyone is searching for water, and then he's just like, yeah, it's really hard to find water out here.
Drinking from his own finger, like, what do you guys do?
Or like it's just someone's like just sweating over there, like, "Oh man, it's such a hot day. Here, I got you," and just starts pouring water in his head. Where are you getting this water from?
And so, so one thing that I wanted to bring up was we talked about the fact that games and storytelling, and especially cinematic storytelling, like it does something that's especially important is that you're playing the game, and that somehow if you incorporate that into your storytelling, it makes your storytelling stronger, but you have to like properly incorporate it. And like I think that D&D is almost like the highest distillation of that theory in terms of like application, because there's no limitations really on what the players can do, right? And their agency is so like complete, but at the same time like their story, there is that like pull and play with the DM. I wonder if there's any type of learnings you can take from the D&D world, because it's obviously not as practical in the game world. You have to have because
here's the thing for when you're making a D&D game is depending on like, because sometimes you're running like a preset campaign, or sometimes you're doing like what I did, and like we just had one session where we made up a world on the spot, and then I filled it with stories, and then they filled in the blanks with their character actions. And when you do it like that, you are creating a lot less work for you in the long run, because you don't have to plan this entire story, and that's generally how I've always been taught to DM is this is how you will have the most fun with your friends is if you just collaborate and you come up with on the fly, and you don't invest all this time up front creating this scenario and this story up front, which then you can't compensate for all player actions. And that's what a video game is, though, right? That's exactly what a video game is. So you get to a certain point where the benefit that you have with playing with your friends is that all the content you discover is not even just new to your players, it is also new to yourself, and you're enjoying that creative process along with them, and that gives you the variety in gameplay that I think you can't get from a typical video game. The closest that I've seen get to it would be something like Divinity Original Sin 2.
Divinity, so good.
Especially the second one, because then you have it has co-op. And you can split off from your party and be a completely different group. And they're off affecting the world while you're off doing your own thing. And that game it's such a massive design effort in that all the stories are... It's done in a very traditional CRPG way where you don't have a dedicated quest marker. It is all based in like vagaries and what you hear people say and what you do and your interpretation of that. And you go to the place where you think you're supposed to do. But they also give you a lot of different opportunities in how you want to tackle that. Like an example from the first game that's very early on is like, I forget how it goes. You have to get a key into like a cell or something, and you can do it by like completing a quest for someone, by straight up buying a key from someone, by finding a key, by befriending a dog because you can speak to animals, and you find out who murdered his owner, and then that leads you into the same spot you're supposed to go. There are so many branching paths. And like Larian Studios is such a masterclass of doing this.
They're godlike. They're so pro. One of the best examples of a small studio's like possibilities.
Well, and they're not even that small anymore.
They're not that small anymore. I wouldn't say they're large though. They're probably like medium size.
Sure. I don't know the exact numbers either, but yes, you are absolutely correct. And that is a design heavy game. Absolutely. Like it is a good looking game. It is not a very sophisticated one. The animations aren't like aren't bespoke in every single situations. Like the monsters are the monsters, the combat is the combat, and it is all very there's a rigidity to it, right? That allows for that. There's a rigidity to the investment in looks that allows for flexibility in the design. And I feel that is an inverse relationship that you find a lot. The more bespoke and impressive set pieces that you make, the less freedom you are giving your players, because obviously you spend a lot of time in this and it's something that you want your players to see.
I think that's okay. So I think that's a key point, and I would make what might be seemed like a massive assertion is that I think that the RPG genre, your typical Final Fantasy turn-based RPG, I think was way better back in the earlier days of Super Nintendo, PlayStation, around that era, because the limitations on their graphics. And this is what I mean by it. Back in the Super Nintendo days, let's take Final Fantasy 6 or 3 to 6, one of the old ones, right? Your character had
3/6.
Your character had
they're both the same game.
I know, it's so confusing. It's so confusing.
Final
the one
Fantasy
with
3
Terra,
on the
Sabin,
SNES.
and Locke. Yeah, okay.
That's Final Fantasy 3 on the Super Nintendo. Final Fantasy
Super
6
Nintendo.
in actuality.
Yeah. Every character had a character sheet, which was just essentially a sprite sheet, right? And they had limited types of expressions that they can do. They can put it with their hand. They can do like these, like very specific expressions. And the storytellers pretty much had to use these expressions for every single type of storytelling, right? Like they had every action. If they were feeling sad, if they had a stomach thing, the stomach thing would be like, they would just go into their down state when they're like their low HP state, right? Yeah, they would take a knee or something, right? But the thing about that is that you as a player, as an audience member, once they establish that early on, they can have the characters express anything between feeling tired, having a stomach ache, hurting their knee, blah, blah, blah. All they have to do is tell it to you in the story, and the characters do a basic thing, right? Mm-hmm. Cut forward now to RPGs nowadays where, like, people are the fidelity is so high for every single character. People don't understand that the amount of work to get a character to do one thing is too much now. You can't have a character where you have, like, say, the new Final Fantasy's level of fidelity, and you get them to like giving someone a sandwich. Literally in the old days, that's 2 pixel art sprites that they had to make.
And none of them would include the sandwich.
None of them include the sandwich, right? And then
the
now
sandwich
it's
didn't
like
even exist.
You have to like animate the entire body, including all the hand. Usually, do you know how many joints a hand normally has?
How many?
In a game. So 3 for each finger. First, so that's 15 joints. Plus, they usually have at least 1 additional joint for each finger for like a stretch and skew, right? And then you have the wrist. So that's
didn't like Infamous Second Son, like just famously have the most expressive fingers because they had like 15 joints per finger or something like that.
You can crank it up. But let's say even this most simplest, 3 for each finger, 1 for each joint bone. That's like what, 15 or something like that, around 14 to 16. Like that's the entire joint count of Cloud in Final Fantasy VII. Like his overworld character had probably like less joints than that, right?
Yeah.
So the idea is that because they have to express so much now, they can't afford to. They're not allowed to reuse the animation. To give someone a sandwich isn't the animation to shake someone's hand, whereas it probably would be back in Final Fantasy VI days, right? And that limit that fidelity that people want and crave so much now. That's exactly what would have made Divinity Original Sin a terrible game. If they had that fidelity and they had to commit to everyone doing all this crazy stuff. What I loved about it is that like Divinity, like in so many ways, encapsulates how you would translate D&D into a single player game or, you know, the co-op game the way they did. Like the combat is actually super interesting for anyone that wants to really get into it. They have that tactician mode, which is very hard. Made the terrible mistake of trying it that first time around, and I've already restarted. Like fucking, you can run into a spider, and I'm like, okay, I have to use every ability that I have, all my potions, throw my armor down, and then 2 of my characters still die. Like this
is the game that you start playing on normal and you lose on the tutorial fight.
Yes, you literally kill. This is the darkest dungeons of it. But they did a great, because then not only did they do the combat system really well, but like you were saying, the storytelling, the story weaving is really a lot like how you would play Dungeons and Dragons. You allow the characters this initial scenario. Let's take Divinity 2's initial scenario, right? You wake up in the middle of a ship and you're a prisoner, right?
Yeah.
And then that's a very
Morrowind start.
Yeah, the Morrowind, like, yeah, exactly. Or the Skyrim start, you're a prisoner, right? And that's a very common scenario because it allows the player to learn what they can do, blah, 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 right? And they can meet characters and they can interact. And it's essentially at the beginning allows them to play however they want. You can even like start pickpocketing people, blah, blah, blah. And then there's a tie-in storyline moment that everyone has to go through, which is when they meet that witch that blows the ship off. Or that sets the ship on fire, and then essentially sets you off in this main quest with all the other characters. That's exactly what D&D is. It's like put your characters into a fun or interesting situation, see what they do, and then have a point that you are going to pull them back to eventually, or that you know that they're going to be going to, right? Yeah. And then I feel like they do such a good job of doing that the entire time.
It's more modern D&D too. I feel like traditional D&D is always you start on a tavern, which is bad, and I don't like it, and I'm glad we as a society has moved away from it.
I will give you a counterpoint to that idea, is that a tavern is a bad place to start for anyone for new players. Because what it does is that usually it's a start, for people that don't know, the start's always like, you know, your characters are in a tavern, and then they all eventually meet up at one table and they talk to each other and role play, right?
Yeah. Or someone approaches them with a quest.
Yes, exactly. So the part where they talk to each other is a great part for experienced D&D players, because then they usually have like a character in mind, and they have like a voice and a backstory and stuff, and it's a great way to introduce each other. But the problem is that role playing is probably the hardest part of a new D&D player's like skill set. Everyone can do the battle system. It's quite simple, right? Like if you think about it. But almost everyone forgets to role play.
Yeah.
And then it's like, hey, you guys meet each other. What do you say? And they're just like, I guess I say, hey. And then you're sitting there, you're like, okay, so what do you say? And it's like, oh, I say hi back. And like, what's your name? And you're just trying to egg the players on. That's what almost guarantee will happen with a new party.
Like, let's acknowledge the fact that, like, role playing for the first time is one of the most awkward things you can attempt. It is gonna be weird for everyone when you start out. The same way as like doing any sort of like dramatic performance for anyone that has never acted before is gonna be awkward.
Fucking weird, dude. Like. That's why it's so important to have a good group, because as soon as you have one person that's like, why are you doing that? That kills the mood.
Yeah.
No one wants to roleplay anymore with a character, with someone that's like that, this judgmental person.
Yeah.
But
thankfully I've never met that person.
I don't think I've ever met that person because
we know people that like to have fun.
Yeah, we know people that like to have fun. No, that's incorrect. As my lifetime as a DM, let me bring you into some of the fun horror stories that I've had.
Okay, let's
as a
go.
Dungeon Master. We're
Let's
using
go.
no names, but there are certain archetypal, just like there's classes. There's like classes of D&D players that I've encountered.
All right.
There's the I would say true neutrals of D&D, which is the min-maxers.
Okay.
Right? They will. Maybe lawful neutral. The min-maxers are probably lawful neutral. They want to min-max. They just want to get the best damage, blah, blah, blah. But then they love the rules because exploiting the rules is what makes it fun for them to be able to like min-max, right?
They're not there for the story. They're there for the systems.
Yeah. Which, like, I think that's not the funnest way to play D&D, but I understand that's one category, right? And then in terms of like when the RP comes in, there are some people who are the bossy people. Like I don't know if bossy is the correct word, but they're almost like the overzealous paladin.
The
they
alpha
have
paladin.
They have an idea of how you are supposed to play D&D in mind, and they think that you need to play it that way, and then my other party members need to play it that way, and they also very often play paladins. Because you know why? Paladins get to be all righteous and holier than thou, and the most annoying thing is a paladin that's constantly like making your group feel bad for doing like weird shit they want to do. Because if they have a chaotic person in the group, they're just constantly fighting, right?
You need someone to balance out that paladin. Like you need someone that says like, no, your gods, you're getting us into all this shit. I'm the one getting us out.
Someone has to humble that paladin.
Yeah,
for sure. So that's one. That's kind of like the person that kind of just takes over the group too much, and then
swore on
no
stream.
one gets a
Sorry.
chance to do. I swore 100 times. I assumed that we're gonna be allowed to.
This is a family show.
But so yeah, there's that kind of player that takes over, right? There's the other side of that, which I'm not saying these people are bad. It's usually just the first kind of impulse you have when you play D&D, and then most people learn to like dial it back or more. And the other side is the too quiet people, the guys who usually have the best role playing possibilities, but they're too shy, or they're just not used to role playing with a group yet. So that's another common player. Another common player is it's like the guy who makes a joke that doesn't know it's not funny.
Oh,
right. Like this is a bad example, of course, but there's always someone that wants to play the crazy bard. So that's the chaotic good bard, and then they misinterpret the word chaotic to mean, oh, I get just to do the most like hurtful
random
thing in the
things,
situation possible, right? So yeah, like that one's always difficult to play with because it's hard to keep them on track. But the thing is with those people who are like, if you pull them back and they learn a little bit more how to play the game, those guys are often the ones that bring the most like interesting things to your party. It's the wild card, but your wild card can't be like roll a 5 and you get shot in the head, right? It needs to be like more reasonable. It needs to be like roll a 1 and maybe you get hurt, not like an extreme death, which is oftentimes what the chaotic characters try to go too far in. And then there's like my favorite characters, who are the people who are like the encyclopedias that just like they know all the story and they like record. They're usually the people who do the recording. I love those people like so much as a DM. They help your life so much. That's like my favorite, the librarian type of players. I love those people.
I feel like there's good and bad versions of all these people, right?
It's so true. Yeah.
There is a version of this librarian person, which is the person that will always say what you will describe something to them, and then say like, oh, well, clearly that is an owlbear, and so you will be. We know that we will have to equip this and that, and that's how we shall beat it. And like your character doesn't know this. You can't bring this knowledge with you.
Yes, that's the meta. That's the meta abuser. The archetype that abuses the meta of you knowing how everything works. They looked up the monster block when you said there was a dragon, and this dragon has multi-claw attack, and that only does 2d6s, okay? So I know that, you motherfucker, maybe I made my own dragon!
And yes, you did make your own dragon.
What's funny about meta users is that, so Arcanum has a system in place to explain that. So in his world, every if you've played multiple characters, it's explained as your soul is refracted.
Oh,
and that's a key part of the lore. Is that
wow?
So then it's actually a pretty crazy moment right now because Moon is playing two characters, one from an old campaign that doesn't play anymore, but they're refracted souls of each other. So then there was a moment where his character now gains all the knowledge of the other character because of a special magical ability. So
crazy.
But then there's this even really cool and really scary idea because now they're fighting amongst the void essentially in Divinity, but it's called the Violet instead. Like it's like their version of the void. That's the end all calamity, right?
Okay.
And then now if the Violet kills you, Arcanum says that you get, it's called Violet Death, which means that not just your character dies, every single one of your refracted characters will also die, and no one will remember them in the campaign anymore.
No.
Yes.
No.
And there's one guy named Stir who's played like 19 characters with Arcanum, right? And there's lots of people who have like 5 or 6 or 3 or something. So then they're getting to the point of the fights now where like Violet Death is happening. Like there's always a possibility because they're constantly fighting the Violet now, and it's so intense. It's so intense. It's so crazy to know that everything is on the line. Because then that means like he has to change the lore. Then if Moon characters die, then everything that they know goes away. Because for example, Moon's other character is the one that's organizing all the heroes to this big final fight. If his character dies, that character no longer has ever existed, and all the campaigns will now no longer be pulled together to fight this last bad guy.
Oh,
and
no!
So
no!
Like, that's actually, yeah. So then he's like, I can't die! It's so funny. Oh my god.
That is...
It's so intense, dude. It's so intense. And he has these rolls where it's like, they roll it with one of the dungeon like trackers that are on stream so everyone sees their dice roll. And when he tells them like... I think it's one of the older ones, Dungeon Explorer. I can't remember the name of it exactly. But when he like asks the player, he's like, I don't know what it is.
Dungeon Explorer is such a Zombocom era of web names.
I think it's an old. I think it's an open source one. So so it might be it. But when he asked one of his PCs, they're like, are you sure you want to do this? If you roll and you lose this roll, your character will Violet die. And this one guy's like, listen, that's what my character would do. Like, he's like a hero, and it's like, it's the most animated moment of all time. Oh, it's
even
so
if
good.
People will forget me, I will remember what I did in this moment.
So have you ever followed the Abridged series? Like any of the Abridged series, like Dragon Ball Z Abridged or Yu-Gi-Oh?
DBZ Abridged, Yu-Gi-Oh Abridged. Yeah, hell
so,
yeah. I fist bumped those people.
The guy who plays Joey and multiple other characters in the Yu-Gi-Oh!
Yeah, he's the guy I
in the
fist
campaign.
with.
Yeah, he's in the campaign.
Nice.
It's so funny, dude. Oh god, and he was saying that like in his next character, he wants to roleplay as a character with a Brooklyn accent like Joey. It's so
okay,
funny,
Kaiba.
That's pretty good. Oh man,
you can't beat my Brooklyn rage.
I can't do it. I wish I had a Brooklyn accent. I'm terrible with accents. That was my
just go listen to what's his name, the politician Bernie Sanders for a bit.
What? He has accents?
Have you not heard Bernie Sanders' accent?
No, I didn't know he does. Wait, he has an accent or he does?
He has an accent.
Yeah,
Seth Meyers makes fun of it all the time. He sounds like an old grocery store owner dealing with millennials.
He does have that.
What a tragedy! I guess you're gonna have to buy ordinary arugula now.
Hey, you can do that like old grandma that like from Brooklyn that wants to help you. Like, do you know that voice I'm talking about?
No, I don't think I do.
Okay, no, I'll send it to you.
Sorry.
But yeah. So the campaign, it's so interesting, and it's gotten me super hyped to like set up my own campaign. I'm so desperate to play again, and this time I'm so close. I'm gonna be able to like actually be a player. My first time being a player. It's gonna be so exciting. Yeah. So that's pretty much all I had about.
Wait, it's not your first time being a player.
I have only played maybe one session as a player.
In our session. What about in our game that we did briefly?
Oh no, that's right. We had one where we had like 3 sessions actually, I think. So bumped up to 4 sessions as a player.
This is the problem when you do D&D sessions with your company, because people leave. People leave the company, and then they're like, well, you can't come back in the building. So
yes, that was essentially what happened. I actually after I left that company, I wasn't able to play D&D with you guys anymore.
It sucks.
So sad. Yeah. That was actually really, really fun. Richard's an amazing DM.
Absolutely. That was really fun.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So I correct myself. This is be my second real chance to play as a player. The first one was one campaign that didn't work, and then the other one was that campaign. So yeah, very, very, very excited. Yeah, that's pretty much all I had. Oh, there's one more thing. As like you mentioned that what was that Dungeon World that you were playing? Was that the
Dungeon World? Yeah,
Dungeon World.
Spin-off from Apocalypse World.
Yeah, they simplified the combat. And I think that's not necessarily a bad idea. Even like that's what 5th edition essentially had to do, is that they simplified the combat so that it's much more approachable. And that really did help like the entire community. And I can't remember who made this point, but it's like it's fun. It's great because when you simplify it, it brings more people in, and the dungeon master can just add homebrew on top of it to make it more complicated up to the point that he likes. But it's very hard to simplify things when the base content's more complicated.
Yeah. Dungeon World has systems for you adding your own actions and your own roles into it. And because literally every single role, there is 6 or 7 base type rolls that are stuff like parlay or volley for any sort of range attack, or hack and slash, which is any sort of fighting attack. And there's actions like that. And then every single one, anything you want to do kind of falls into those categories.
Yeah.
And then augmenting those are your abilities as a character. And each one of them says, you take this 2 plus this much modified by your wisdom, and then you roll a hack and slash roll. So, it all comes back to those basic actions, but your abilities all are augments and modifiers and status effects that are applied via those rolls. And then depending on which percentile you roll, which is like there is anything below a 6 is a fail, anything from 6 to 9 is a partial success, and usually the ability will say like, oh, you expose yourself to danger, or take damage, or lose equipment, and it's up to the DM to like contextualize that in the story and pick a downside to the ability, or give them like a difficult choice. Like, say, if you roll like a partial success on a dodge, it's like, okay, you can roll out of the way, but that metal orb, that's the whole reason you were in this dungeon, it will shatter if you roll with it. So you can take this damage and protect the ball, or you can roll and this ball will be damaged in some way.
Right. So essentially what it is that instead of a DC that's changing for everything, it uses like a global DC system for the dungeon master. And then
your abilities modify that in order to push it, to make it more likely to go above the DC or lower down on the DC.
Right, yeah. I can see how that's very simplifying things. The only thing that doesn't lend itself to is one cool thing, but isn't super is very hard to set up, is the showing the skill disparity between between characters. You know, like when you're like a level 4 dude and you come up to like a level 16 dude, that's a guaranteed death fight, right?
Yeah.
Right. Whereas I think that that system sounds like it might have a little bit of a limit on how far one person can be at like more powerful than someone else. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, because most campaigns, like you were saying, like run 8 to 10 is pretty generous. If you get to 8 to 10 sessions, that's a pretty above average group length. And I think that system, you won't even notice a difference if you only go 8 sessions. It's like if you start playing like 25 sessions, then you'll start noticing that kind of power differential thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's something we should touch on, is like how long these campaigns can be. But there is a ton of options for smaller tabletop games that you can do in like even a session, or like shorter, like things like Blades in the Dark or The Quiet Year, or trying to think of another one. There was one that I actually backed recently on Kickstarter, so I did back this. It's called Monster Care Squad, and it was so interesting to me, because it is a non-combat monster hunter type game.
Where
you reach a town, and the town has a problem with these monsters that like are ascended from gods, right? So they are these mythical creatures that like you don't want to kill, but they are rampaging across the land and are causing all sorts of problems because there is something wrong with them. And your job is to go through a few phases where you diagnose what the issue is, you brew a solution for it, and then you engage the monster and you try to apply your cure to it. And like that's a complete like its own tabletop experience, and it comes with like a book, and it's full of monsters, and you read it.
Yeah.
And that's like a board game, right? That is something you can sit down and you try and solve. But it is also it is not what Arcanum or Matt Mercer or my Dungeon World is, because it is purely like it is created, right?
Yeah.
You have
it's a one shot, and it's a set story.
It's a set story.
Yeah, I totally understand that.
But you get it done in like
you need that kind of entry level game. I think that the thing that's been holding those kind of games back is that it's like it's a shorter amount of time to play, but oftentimes the setup time and the learning time is higher than regular board games, because they're still
you
like
think
that.
So?
Yeah, so I think that the key for those games are usually to be able to set up them quicker, or if they're meant for like more experienced D&D people, but they all just want to play a one shot together and like a different story. But I do think those games are key, because those are going to be the ones that introduce people over, like that lower the barrier to entry to play D&D. But I think that as soon as you get above that barrier to entry and of complexity, it's so good. It's so good. Like there's enough there that draws you back in. But that barrier to entry is pretty freaking high.
Yeah.
Like to make a character, I already had one person that I really wanted to play with, but then they were scared away by the fact that there's a fucking billion classes, and the character creation requires you to jump through like 8 different pages of stuff. Like it's too much.
That's the advantage of Dungeon World too, is that the character classes are super straightforward, and if you want to create your own character class, they also have a system for that. And
that's good.
It is super straightforward.
That's good.
They even give you like recommendations for like skills, or like if you get this here, you're more likely to roll well in this and that, because it's all the same percentile, so you know what to focus on.
Useful. Yeah, that makes it really useful. Yeah,
you should really check out Dungeon World. It's phenomenal, really.
It's not that I don't think it's good. It's that I want the whole steak now.
Yeah.
I don't want half a steak. I want the whole thing. I want to sink my teeth into like the deepest parts.
I would say like it's not even a whole steak. It is chicken. It's lean. It's easy to cook. It is.
Yes.
You can get into it, and you can have a really good and wholesome experience in it. But I get what you mean.
I'm already past that point.
There's the veiny sinew of D&D that you can really get into. And you know what? I like beef, but I'm good with the chicken in these situations.
Especially if there's certain people that like the RPing a lot more than any of the complexities, and that's completely fine too. Like most of the people that jumped into Matt Mercer's like Critical Role, they want that experience. That like what's nice about Matt is that he the characters simplify it and make it look so easy, because it's just like he first off, no one knows, people don't talk about this, but each one of those people now has a person there to help them do all the D&D and all the extra stuff. Plus Matt Mercer has a camera team. Like it's a whole production now.
What do you mean they got like an assistant? They got a D&D assistant?
There's like someone there to help them, like first off, like figure like if they don't have, because they're all extremely busy, like famous people already, right? Sure. To like help them build their stats, or if not that, something like to do themselves, like just help them set up, to like give them water, like just to make the whole production easier. They're essentially filming a shoot.
Laura Bailey is the Meryl Streep of video games, so
yes, she deserves all of that, right? But it's also what my point is that they have a lot of help to make it simpler, right? Like Matt Mercer, it's not apparent to the obvious person how much work Matt Mercer has to do for that world, because when he shows it, it's super presented and it's almost like it's scripted. They bring out these pieces which they've gotten artists to build large dragon sculptures, or just the map building is fucking insane sometimes too, right? Like so like there's all that work that goes into it. I think what makes Matt Mercer legit is that I think everyone knows he actually does that work, which a lot of people normally wouldn't, right? So he actually does all that work, but it doesn't seem complicated because they're role playing so easily, and then he's doing everything kind of behind the scenes and making these decisions like in his head essentially.
Yeah.
When it seems simple, whereas when you're playing D&D yourself and you don't have that kind of help, it gets very complicated. it gets super complicated to the point that people, like, if you're really into it and you're a min-maxer, they'll just start talking about like buffs like for the entire session. like how can we buff each other? Do you have this potion? I got this potion. I got this cape.
Yeah. That's something that's like also really important to discuss is like how, if you want something to be good, you got to put like a lot of effort into it, right? And
I think that's the thing. Yeah.
There's no miracle cure, right? Like the miracle cure to like making high quality things is to put more people on it and more talented people on it for longer hours.
I think the whole thing is that it's just like a gateway mechanic.
Yeah.
And that some people might not have a certain threshold of how much role playing or how much investment they want to give into it. And if they want to give a very small amount and they want to play a pre-set up game or a quicker one, that'll be enough for them to understand what it's good. Like it's like introducing rosé to people who like wine, you know, like it's an easier wine to drink, and then it might introduce you to the more complicated stuff. And then those who really like the complicated stuff probably won't like the earlier stuff anymore, or the more simpler things.
Yeah.
But that's fine. It's just like a gradient that slowly pulls you into this world, which is exactly what like a good game does, right? Like that's the thing that most modern games have been trying to do, is that they've been trying to simplify the front of their game enough so that anyone can jump into it. But the good ones are the ones that have enough depth that keep you into it after you've gotten the first basic steps, right? Like there's more to bite on. There's more to bite on.
And then there is Divinity Original Sin, which says, you know what you want, and we're giving it to you, and we're not going to go
easy. If
easy.
you don't want this, you can go away. But if you do want it, we're going to spank you.
Yeah. How perfect is it that Larian Studios is the one that inherited the D&D Baldur's Gate license?
Oh my god,
such a
so
perfect
good.
fit.
It's so, and it's like people don't understand how good this Divinity Original Sin 2 is. Like, not only is the base game amazing, but the modding community is it's insane.
Really?
They've come up with like whole classes that you can just add in, and then suddenly now there's a character there. You drag and drop. You can be like you can be a Thor like thunder warrior, right?
Get your tickle hands on.
Yeah, there's frost liches. There's like all this like necromancers and umbras, like alternatives to scoundrels and stuff. It's so cool that you can kind of expand the gameplay to as much as you want. And then the story itself is a classic, like probably the most classic D&D story, while being its own like thing. It's so good. There's like, you're a godwoken, so you know there's a call to action that's constantly pulling. It's like if you break apart that story, it's how you can dissect and make an entire D&D world that fits very well together. Right? Like the call to action is very strong. there's every character has a 7 god that calls to them, so that brings all the party members together. Right, and then they're moving through these towns that have their own little storylines and quests, but they're all like pushing towards this final goal. Like, you know, everyone's fighting the magisters, and you're trying to figure out what the source is, and etc.
Oh, the source.
So it's yes. And then, you know, there's different planes of existence, and you're talking about what the gods want, and then the enemies of the gods. You know, it's so cool that way. Yeah. They do a really good job. I love that game so much. I'm going through it right now, actually.
Really? First time?
Yeah. So I played Divinity 1, which was great, but I also got
Divinity
super
1
frustrated.
or Original Sin 1?
Divinity Original Sin 1.
Gotcha.
Sorry. Which was great, but then I just wanted to play the storyline first, and man, I got frustrated by some of the mechanics that were really annoying, but then Divinity 2 pretty much fixed almost all of it.
Yeah.
And then if there wasn't a fix for it, there was like the workshop, which fixed everything else for it. So I'm going through Divinity Original Sin 2 right now. And I'm doing a lone wolf build with 2 characters instead of 4, which is much more fun to me.
Wow.
Yeah, I like it a lot. Do you ever do it?
I haven't played Divinity Original Sin 2. I've only played like the beginning parts of original. You know me. I'm terrible at finishing RPGs. I love them from like a mechanical standpoint, but like I get to a certain point where my attention gets pulled to something else. So I never got the chance to finish it.
Yeah. I've definitely been going back and forth to it, like, and
it's long.
I liked playing. It's very long, and I made the mistake of downloading a mod in the first playthrough. I played Tactician the first playthrough, which was the first mistake. But then it was I made the game harder by activating a mod that gave every encounter, they would give a random buff to one of the monsters that had like a very specific game mechanic, like it would reflect all melee damage in one turn and then swap with range damage to the next turn. So you have to like play around it, right? But that made the game too hard. So then I downloaded another mod that allowed me to increase my party size to 6. But then that created its own problems, and now that there was like a matrix of equipment that I could not get my head around.
Why can't you just play the game the way the developers want you to play the game?
Too much. And then now I'm replaying it again by doing the lone wolf build, because it's the exact opposite. There's only 2 sets of equipment that I ever need to worry about. And then everyone feels like a badass because they're so much stronger. They get like double stat points every time you put into anything. So yeah, a lot more fun. I'm having a great time with that right now.
Did you ever play OG Baldur's Gate?
I played OG Baldur's Gate, but way after it came out. And I only played the first quarter of it.
I've been trying to like play the enhanced edition of it, and like the one, because they I forgot the name of the company, but they remade like Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, Neverwinter Nights, Icewind Dale, Planescape, all those Infinity Engine games.
Yes. Icewind Dale. Woo!
I don't think I like those games.
Remember, those are games for pre-Divinity Original Sin 2, which is the one that got it right.
Yeah,
I think every game before that
it's just,
got it wrong.
It's just what bothers me is that basic like the D&D mechanics of it. You know, it's like I like the world and I like exploring it, but then I have to look at like that stat screen and like the weapons and say like this does between 2 to 9 damage, and I'm like, it's the Pathfinder of those like RPGs. Have you ever played Pathfinder? Yes, Pathfinder is the. Was Pathfinder the one that we played?
No, we played 5th edition.
Okay. So to show you how much little difference all this makes to me, I did play Pathfinder in my other D&D session, and I thought we were playing Pathfinder when we were, which I'm sure to like people watching that's going to be sacrilege, but like,
well, yes,
but to me it's like I could not tell you the difference between them.
Well, the main difference is that Pathfinder's character building is extremely complex, in that there's a lot of synergies, and you could min-max, like it's a min-maxer's dream, right? But the problem of doing that inside of a video game is that it's too complicated. No one wants to deal with that when you're playing the game. I think that's why like simplifying is a bit better, and then whenever you simplify the fighting and the game mechanics, it helps build the story building a bit easier because it's a bit more fluid. That's what I feel about like Icewind Dale and stuff.
Here's the problem that I actually have with with sort of these CRPGs that do try and do these story-based games and like dice rolls, and dice are magical things, okay? Dice are extremely magical. Back in the day, little history 101 with Louise. Back in the day, did you know where dice originated from?
No.
Dice were from knuckle bones. Knuckle bones that were used for divining things, by finding truths in the world. And eventually they became carved, and they started marking dice with like dots and stuff, and then they became dice as we know them, and it started being used for games, because divining eventually became like a game of its own, like it became a chance. And even the Romans, they interpreted dice rolls as like, when they rolled dice and dice rolled badly, that's just the will of the gods. The gods are who had control of the chance of the dice. And this is why dice are magical still in this time, Ken, because dice, when you use them correctly in RPGs and in board games, they change outcomes. They change your life. They change your paths. They change your stories.
I'm with you. Where are you going with this, though?
You have that power when you're playing Dungeon World. You have that power in playing D&D, right? That choice that I mentioned before, when you slip and you have to decide, do I drop my objective? Do I let it get cracked? Or do I get out of danger? Or do I protect my body? That's a story-building moment. In a game, like when I was playing Baldur's Gate, the dice rolls just determined whether I got hurt or not, or I had to restart this checkpoint in this fight. Like the dice were invisible, and they were not magical, you know?
Yeah, I wonder if that is a limitation to video games, in that
the way
you think about video games,
and that's what bothers me, you know?
Yeah. Like, think about video games, if you were playing Dungeons and Dragons, like, you, instead of having, I don't know, like a few days to prepare your next campaign session, it's that you have 3 years to plan all of the campaigns, and then the player plays it the entire way through.
Yeah. And they
like,
must choose one of the branching paths, right?
Exactly. Because if they don't, then you're
problem,
fucked.
Right?
Yeah.
When you play Fallout and you have those different ways you can resolve the stories, right? And like, in some stories it works, sometimes it doesn't. But it literally comes down to like, is your skill high enough than this? And then like it does the invisible dice roll for persuasion, and then you either succeed or fail. And if you fail, you're just like, well, I'm just gonna reload, unless you make it a rule for yourself that you're just gonna continue.
I think that's an example of them doing it poorly. But I do think that there are examples, like the one you mentioned with Original Sin 2, of it doing well. So like the problem with it you're mentioning is, like, say you need to like steal a key or steal some treasure or something, right? The problem is that like games like Fallout sometimes make the decision as in, hey, do an intelligence check, and then that's it. You get it or you don't get it, right? It's a like a choice decision that you make.
Yeah.
Whereas like the better thing is, like, if you hide it behind more things, like they have to break into the basement, but then they can break into the basement any way they want. They can maybe RP with a character that will get them into it, blah 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 blah, and then that changes it from just a one simple dice roll to one. It's like, can you figure it out? So that adds the player like intention there, and then they can have a series of dice rolls that are hidden behind it, right? But then the main goal should never just be like, check this thing and then you get it.
Yeah.
Which in freaking Fallout, there would be like, I hated when it would be the most crucial part of the storyline, and it's like, can you make this one check? And it's like yes or no, when it should be like the entire, like, say if it's a boss fight, it should be like based off of the entire way that you got to that boss fight. It should have been mainly determining what happens there, rather than like vice versa, right? That's what I think about.
You know what does this actually extremely well, and some of them are RPGs, some of them they're kind of RPGs. Like immersive sims, like Deus Ex or the new the latest Prey game from 2017. People don't talk enough about Prey. I feel that new game. It is such a good immersive sim, and like I will always like touted like this is a version of BioShock that I actually enjoy. even though people like always like talk about BioShock is the most amazing, I'm like, no dog, look at Prey. Prey is a game that presents you with so many options to get in and out of any room, either by having enough strength to move a box, by having enough stealth to get by enemies, by having enough destructive power that you can just blow through any sort of enemy in your path. And towards the end, it sort of becomes a power fantasy, and that's when the game becomes less interesting, because you don't have to make a choice. You can just make all the choices. But in those early periods of Prey, it is scary, and it is head scratching, and like you feel you're constantly rewarded for being smart.
Prey is definitely like a very slept on game. I felt like.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened with their marketing or something, but like it didn't pan through, and it's a much better game than
people give it credit for. Yeah,
people get it credit for. Oh, so one more game I wanted to bring up was very interesting. Is that a huge game that I would never really expected to become important for the role playing side is GTA. GTA has a ridiculously large role-playing community where they just role-play but in the GTA world or some sort of silly world on Twitch or YouTube, right? That's very interesting that it's just like, because it's a sandbox, and I think that's what you need is like if you wanted to make your own like world where it's complete freedom for the players, you're gonna have to just give them a sandbox and let them do Minecraft and stuff like that, right?
And I think that's
which isn't bad.
That's part of the thing is that, like, here's where my controversial opinions start showing. That's sort of the thing where GTA and Red Dead are obviously going to shine more because of where they put most of their effort into it. Because those games look amazing. They have a lot of options. They have a lot of immersion potential in them, in their animations, in their systems, and their mechanics. But as video games, as designed experiences, they are kind of lacking. Especially Red Dead Redemption, which is one of the most immersive and beautiful and awesome sounding games I have ever played in my life. I love that title so much. I would hesitate to say I like that game.
Well, they used all of their power and resources into the fidelity.
Yeah,
and,
to
like,
the expense. Of the design, I feel.
Well, it's often that trade-off. It's even though, and you know, it's hard.
This is literally what we were talking about at the start of this podcast. Like, it all comes back to that trade-off.
And what's super hard that people don't realize in games is that they'll see the final product of the game and they'll assume that every decision was actually a conscious decision, when oftentimes it's actually an amalgamation of a bunch of unrelated decisions that just happened to go through.
That is very
was the
true.
only way to fit all the pieces together. And so when they probably weren't making this specific decision in Red Dead Redemption, they were probably thinking like, we need to push one category or two categories the best that we can, and that's how a lot of studios work. They're like what can we do this one thing really, really well, so that like it's what we get noticed for.
Oftentimes it's also like which voices you have in the room, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
Like,
the leadership is key. It's so key.
I look at some systems in Red Dead Redemption, like sort of the upgrade systems or like the hunting systems, and I'm like, I feel like there was only a very small voice pushing for this feature in this game because it is so lackluster and so bare bones compared to the quality of everything else.
Yeah.
That it feels like this is the thing that slipped because maybe that one voice wasn't heard enough or like wasn't as prioritized, you know? Yeah, and that is a studio decision to make, right? Yeah,
and unfortunately, any radical ideas have a poor footing at any of the beginning, just because like the more radical or more out there idea it is, the more pushback you have against it. Just like in a numbers game in a group of 100 people, if you have an idea that 50% like, it's gonna be easy to go through than if you have an idea that only 10% like.
Yeah, and like I don't. Designed by community doesn't work, right? So eventually you do have to have someone in charge and like pick and choose what is the things that you're going to focus on, and like that's fine, right? And ultimately that's what makes it interesting that like you go and you play GTA online and most people are in there for their friends. They're in there for it's like a hangout, right? The part where you play the game is almost secondary.
It's very secondary. It's something to do. It's like going to the bar and you're not necessarily there for the drinks, but you're there for the hangout. Yeah. Right. And the drinks is just something to do while you hang out. That's fun and interesting.
And then someone bowls you over with a monster truck. It's exactly like a bar.
Exactly like a bar. Yeah. That's pretty much. Yeah. That's all I have for it. I think we're getting close to the time that we were gonna end anyways.
I'm losing my voice, so it's definitely getting close.
Do you have any other non-D&D related subjects that you want to talk about? Anything new? Are you playing anything new right now?
No, it's been very quiet. I have a steady stream of things that I will be getting into in the future as they start coming out, starting with Total War Troy that comes out tomorrow.
Very interesting.
Heads up, that will be free on the Epic Game Store.
Oh.
So you should.
Okay, here's the thing I said about that I said about Total War 2 Shogun or Shogun 2 is that after I played Total Warhammer, it's hard.
Total War Warhammer.
Total War Warhammer. It's hard for anything to really beat that when you have like flying mages on dragons fighting Cthulhu characters. So,
Hell yeah.
So as cool as Troy might be, I hope that there is some sort of gods and I get to fight Zeus or some shit.
I don't know.
I hope Achilles is there.
It's set in the Bronze Age, but I'm not sure how fictional it is.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah. Because there's two
I
sides
assume
to Total War.
the Pantheon is maybe related there somehow, but
like in Shogun, there's religion, but it really plays kind of like a non-mystical version.
Yeah,
of it. It's just a belief.
Yeah,
system.
it's not Age of Mythology style where like Anubis is gonna come down and step on your enemies.
It's like imagine you're playing a Dungeons and Dragons game, but then the guy decides to put nothing magical in there, and you're just doing regular person shit all day long. And you're like
Kingdom
I can
Come
play
Deliverance?
the fucking, I can play the super magical one, or I can play the regular dude one. I want the magical one.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's free, and I enjoyed Total War in the past. I'm willing to also try it. It's also It's also a Total War Saga game, which is like it's smaller scale.
Oh, that's kind of nice actually.
That's how their cadence for these go. It's like they do like a Total War like full release, like 3 Kingdoms, where they add like a bunch of systems and a lot of big cool things. And then they started naming them Saga games, like Total War Attila, Total War Thrones of Britannia, Total War Troy now. Total War Saga. They called it a Total War Saga Troy.
So it's essentially during the Roman.
It's like Far Cry Primal, right? Sorry,
no, I was trying to guess what time period. It's the Roman era.
No, it's
I
Bronze
guess?
Age. Bronze Age.
Oh, Bronze Age. Okay, so that's Greek.
Yeah, it's Greek
era,
time.
right?
Like still, that's it's pre BC still. I'm pretty sure. Yes.
I don't know exactly the dates, but I do have a fascination with that era because that era is what set the military standard for the Romans, who eventually became the most dominant force in like Western Europe for a very long time.
Yeah, which as people are fond to say, where they conquered the entire world in self-defense.
Yes, exactly. I love that you know that. Like, whoa, bro, you're too close. Let me take over your house. And then you move into the new houses and you go to the next neighbor. You're like, whoa, bro, you're too close now. What the hell? I'm going to take over your house. And just keep going and going and going.
Why don't you just start paying taxes to us so these things can go a lot simply?
I'll give you a little tidbit for your playthrough. Well, probably not for your playthrough. But the reason that the Romans, one of the reasons that the Romans are were so nefariously strong wasn't just because they eventually had a very strong military. That was much later on when they were already conquering a lot of places. Yeah. It was that after they would have these, like in ancient battles, say the army is like 40 to 50,000, probably a bit smaller for back then. If you lost an army and either a lot of people were killed or a lot of your army was scattered, that was pretty much it. There is no way that people could rally and find that much people in fucking villages and like nobles and stuff to go fight again. But there were multiple times that the Romans got their shit beat up so badly, but then they were able just to raise more people through their general population and have another army, and then another army. Like the most famous one, Hannibal, who is like Rome's very like notorious enemy. He crossed the Alps, which is the famous feat
on elephants.
On elephants or with elephants, and he beat the first army, right? They sent another army, so he destroyed the first. They sent another army. He beat that army again. They sent another army, and he beat that army again until the next general, who's very famous, because his name is Fabian. His whole strategy was to no longer fight Hannibal at all, period. That was his whole thing, right? We're not going to fight at all. They had 4 tries at this thing, and then they eventually won. Like wow. Normally you beat one army and that's it. You conquer that entire kingdom. But then for some reason the Romans were just stubborn, and they had like a very obviously very strong culture that allowed them to just like raise more troops somehow. So that's the beginning of the Roman army. Yeah. little tidbit, little history tidbit.
Did a quick search just to make sure about things. Bronze Age was 3200 BC to 1200 BC. Roman Empire was 27 BC to like 400.
You say 200 BC, and then Roman was 2700 BC?
No, 27, period.
And then, no, when was the end of the Bronze Age?
1200 BC.
Okay,
so like Roman Empire was 1,000 years afterwards. So it's a waste of, but it's amazing how like those, because I have the same problem. It's sort of like a Mandela effect, because to me it was like, oh yeah, Greeks and Romans, they fought all the time, and like it's the same time period. But no, it's not. It's not at all.
They did fight, but then the thing is that the Greeks like continued on for a long time.
Yeah. But it's different, right?
It's different, but what's interesting is that the Bronze Age, you can read about this. The end of the Bronze Age, nobody knows what happened because there's no information, but there is archaeological evidence that a massive calamity of some sort happened that wiped almost all the big civilizational players out at the beginning of the Bronze Age, and nobody knows what it is. Nobody knows.
Isn't like a thing with like the reason why like the Roman Empire ended, of course, with like the barbarian invasion. But then also the Black Plague happened, which led to the Dark Age.
That was later on. So by the time the Black Plague happened, that was
I'm just wondering if it's something
stage.
Similar, right?
Oh well, it might be. But the thing is that so the whole area around Roman Greece is essentially it's almost like a giant sea that has access to the ocean, right?
Yeah.
Through one parts of it, right? So the thing is they have like some records, but very vague records, and they have records of people writing about, like, it's essentially people fleeing and telling the people that they went to flee to about the horrors that's happening. And it was something, it wasn't just a play, because they were talking about a group of pirates or a type of like force of army that swept through, but nobody knows. And it's so weird because you don't especially after the Bronze Age, it was a civilizational high in the Bronze Age, and then suddenly like the technological feats were just they plummeted down like crazy, right? And that's
it's clear when you look at just the architecture and the art of like Greece, and then you compare it to like paintings from 1400, right?
Mm-hmm. Like the medieval ages,
it's like it's all lost. It's all gone.
Lost. Yeah, there is. Yeah, so then it's fascinating. That Bronze Age era is so interesting because you just don't know what happened and then like suddenly it's like a giant blank in your memory. Like the world, like historians had a giant blackout drunk sessions and they just lost that memory and they pick it back up during the rise of like the Greeks and stuff like that. And,
the empty spot is when Cthulhu finally woke.
And by the way, Persia, Prince of Persia, blah blah blah. That's they're one of the first civilizations to rise up after the fall of the Bronze Age. Yeah.
So the Persian Empire was after the Bronze Age then. So like all that fight between Sparta and Athens and all that was.
So
that
to
was
give
after?
you an example, the
Persians were still
what's his name?
around.
Alexander the Great.
Yep.
His whole conquest is the period to the Persian Empire. It ended the Persian Empire.
Okay.
He is considered the last Persian prince or the Persian king because he essentially took over so much of that empire when he went conquering. And then what happened was he died when he was like fucking 21 because he overdrank or some shit like that. After he conquered the entire world, and then all of his generals ended up taking over parts of those worlds and forming dynasties from the overall conquering that he did with Persia and parts of Asia. Yeah, it's fascinating. This
is me realizing that I am interested by and I should read up more on history.
So
we're gonna get a ton of emails on this.
It's so fascinating, man. Like the whole idea of Alexander is fascinating, and then like his military creed trickled down to the Romans, and that's how Romans got a lot of their fighting style. It was an evolution of the Greek fighting style, which is with the phalanx, the spears sticking out, and
shield walls.
Shield walls, and then the Romans improved upon it, not necessarily with weaponry, but with organization. The Romans were amazingly organized, which sounds stupid, but it was the thing that got that.
Yeah,
made
there are
them so much
legions
better.
and there's sentries. And...
The way that the way that it was told to me as an analogy was that imagine two football teams, right? One is made up of a bunch of people who are in the same neighborhood and they haven't played each other for the first time, and then they get called and they play on the day of. That is the army of your traditional army back in the day, where it's made from farm workers and nobles and blah blah blah. The Romans had an actual military where you were professionally paid as a soldier. So every day you are training and drilling, blah blah blah. And then it's like they go onto the battlefield, the football field, and one team has plays. They're fucking running Hail Marys and shit like that, and the other team has no coordination. That was the fighting difference between the Romans and other armies that they fought, was that they had formations. Other armies would just stand there. They're just like just spread apart, right? And then, it wasn't until they learned from the Romans that they eventually incorporated those military tactics. But
and then at some point, I feel like military tactics go like back and forth, because then at some point, like Revolutionary era, it was just two armies standing on a field shooting guns at each other.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see the evolution of like when guns come into play. And we were talking about the Mongol armies back in the day. It wasn't until the creation of machine guns or multiple firing rifles that they were able to deal with horse archers. Horse archers were still raiding Russians and Chinese when they had all the way through the pirateering era, when they had flintlock and steel guns and stuff, because they were better shooters. They were better shooters than the people who had guns. And it wasn't until the machine gun
and reloading an arrow
spray.
On horseback is probably a lot easier than reloading a pistol on horseback.
Well, it's almost impossible to reload that pistol in time. And with the Mongols, and they proved it was the Native Americans of like North America as well. They would hold 3 or 4 arrows in one hand. And so if you're looking at my hand here, right, they would have one arrow that's like this, and they pull it, right. They would have another arrow here, and another arrow here. And so as they shot this one arrow, they would like somehow do some finger trick and then move it to the next arrow. So they were able to shoot. This is fact in the West, in the Wild West, in the Americans.
1800s.
They weren't able to fend off the Native American tribes until the invention of the 6-shooter, because they weren't able to shoot as many bullets as these warriors were able to shoot like 5 arrows in one go, and they got one bullet. And then once they got the revolver, that shifted the entire kind of Wild West landscape, and some of the Westerners and the villagers
as they're fond to say, perhaps incorrectly, like that's how the West was won.
The West was won with plagues, dude.
Yeah.
The freaking
Smallpox
plague killed 90% of the population. And then like these numbers that people are talking about with like Geronimo and stuff, like there was like these Native American tribes that had like maybe a couple of thousand people, and they were fending off armies of like 50,000 like colonial like
Jesus.
It's crazy. It was insane how much they were able to do given how devastated that their communities were.
Fuck. History's a nightmare.
It is wild, dude. That's why I love Total War, because I love like playing around with those kind of concepts and like military strategies.
Yeah. They're very good games. They're addicting. I'm interested in saying it. That's my plan starting tomorrow, is I have to do it. I'm also playing Shadow of War.
Oh, nice.
Because I never got around to it, and then for some reason I just decided, like, you know what? I'm gonna go and play this game for real this time, instead of just buying and looking at it. Sorry?
That one orc that keeps killing you and showing up again.
I ran into one of those, and he's a real bastard.
It's so funny how much hate you start developing for these guys.
It's like, no, I can't just simply beat this guy. I need to humiliate him.
And then just wait until you get ones that have like really good traits, like you can't execute them and they auto like block your parries or some shit, and you're just like, you You mother trucker.
And like he always shows up in the most inopportune time. You're like, okay, I'm here. I'm gonna scout this captain. I'm gonna get him and recruit him into my army. Then I'm gonna make him spy on this warship. And you start the mission, and then you take 2 steps, and this guy is like, Gravewalker. It's like the friend from university that you never want to see again. And he just shows up, and he's like, Gravewalker, let's go have a beer of death. Like,
it's
no,
they just keep showing
no,
up.
Grawl,
Like,
I don't want to have a beer with you. Go away.
Yeah. Well, good luck with that game. I love that game. That was
I'm enjoying it quite a bit. I'm like 15 hours into it, and I'm not stopping anytime soon.
Nice.
Flight Simulator next week.
Yo, hype.
What? That game is gorgeous. Oh my god, I don't even know.
It looks so
I don't even know what I'm
gorgeous.
gonna do in that game, but I just want to play it.
I would never play it. It's too complicated. There's no way I'm gonna learn how to properly fly a plane.
You can do it. Look, I even got one of these.
I will see you in X-Wing versus. I'll see you in Star Wars Squadrons. That's my thing.
Right.
Yeah, I'll see you in space.
That was me trying to get my HOTAS out of the HOTAS cubicle. But...
bro, you got a HOTAS? That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's
it's that one that came with Ace Combat 6 on the 360.
As long as it works. Something's
wrong with the rubber on that thing because it ends up being like so sticky just from lack of time, and it's gross. And it doesn't matter how much I clean it. Apparently they say you got to use alcohol, but then that destroys the material. And I'm like, oh, do I want to get rid of the material and have it not be sticky, or do I just put up with it? It's a tough choice.
I think you put a grip around it, like a tennis grip.
You know what? That's probably the correct solution.
I actually like playing with the controller, like a PS3 controller or PS4 controller more.
It's true. Then you also gotta have the keyboard on the side so you can
because you don't have enough
configure
buttons.
your flaps.
Yeah, you don't have enough.
Your
buttons.
fuel mixture. I
tried playing in VR, and it's so goddamn overwhelming in VR. You don't know where any of the buttons are, and they're not labeled for some fucking reason. It's just like 1, 2, 3.
Man,
what do you want me to do with this?
Then the DCS Digital Combat Simulator, there's like the free version on Steam, and I put that in VR, and I had like a checklist, and I kept like pulling the VR up just to like check the checklist,
so
and then
painful.
and then I started doing a bunch of stuff, and then the computer started yelling at me in Russian, and like I couldn't figure out how to make it stop, so I just like I can't do this. I can't do this.
Yeah, I had that exact same experience in VR. Flight sims are not the place to be in VR. You don't want that's too complicated. You can barely think like about anything normally in VR, let alone trying to operate a complicated machine.
Yeah, people are really enjoying the demo of Flight Simulator, though. They're like landing on the Golden Gate Bridge. They're like flying around the world, seeing how much detail that the team has put on certain areas, and it looks gorgeous. Some of the stuff that I've seen, I'm really excited just to even just put it down to like an easy mode and just fly around, just like see like where I was born in Brazil, right, and see that skyline, and maybe make that trip from Brazil over to Canada that like I made, or like go fly over Canada and see Montreal, which I might be going to.
Check out your new stomping grounds.
Yeah. So that's another exciting thing, and after that is just the wait until Watch Dogs, Squadron, Cyberpunk. That's when we start getting into the shit. My light just went out. Yeah. That's when we start getting into like the real release schedule. Once the Madden gates open, as they say. Everyone's just waiting for Madden to come out, and then video games can start existing again. I feel that's becoming less and less of a thing as time goes on, and release date games start being released on like Fridays instead of just Tuesdays.
Well, in the meantime, you can watch D&D.
It's true.
Yeah.
Play some D&D. Eventually tackle Divinity again.
All right. I think that's pretty much it. You got anything else?
No, I'm all good. You all good?
I'm all good. Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
I'm just turning on a little outro music there.
Cool. I've started to stream a lot of my art painting for D&D. So if anyone's listening, you want to check me out, just check out Tenha604 on Twitch. And then I stream usually late nights.
All right. And for us, you can always come back here and watch us Beyond the Pixel.